Hey guys, and welcome to another video in the Python programming tutorial for beginners. In this video we're going to talk about file handling in Python, and I'll show you how to handle files in Python where we can open CSV files or just an ordinary text file, and then we can do some kind of operations on the text file, and we can put out the numbers or get the numbers from a file, and we can open up and close the files. So let's jump into the Jupyter Notebook and see some examples on how to handle files in Python. We're now in the Jupyter Notebook again, and we're talking about file handling in Python. And in the first example here I have is how to open and create a file in Python. So we use this function called open, which is a function that takes two parameters. The first parameter is the file name. So we can specify the file name of either the file we want to open or create. And if we just specify the name, it will be in the same directory as as our Jupyter Notebook is in, or our Python script. And we can also specify another path from, for example, in the downloads or documents or just on the desktop. And then we need to specify the whole path here in the file name parameter. And then it's also possible to define a mode, which we'll talk about. I'll show you some different kind of examples, but we can have a text mode or binary mode and stuff like that. So these are the two parameters that we parse to the open function, and then we can open and create files or manipulate them in some kind of way. So the first example here is the read, how to read a file, and then we specify the keyword R in the open function here. And if we don't specify anything, it will be the default value. So if we don't specify any keywords, it will just read the file. And we open up a file for reading, and if the file doesn't exist, it will throw an error to us, so we can see that this file doesn't exist and we can read from it. So the second thing here is how to append to a file, and then we use to specify the keyword a, and we can then open up a file for appending. So we write to a file, write to a file, so we append that thing to a file. And if the file doesn't exist, it will just create the file that we specify the file name here. And then we can also write to a file if we just want to take a file, open it, and then write something to it that we want. And then the keyword will be W, and it will open up a file for writing, and it will create the file as well if it doesn't exist already in the directory you want to create the file or write to a file that already exists. We can also if we just want to create a file in our directory, we can use the keyword X here, and it creates the given file that we want, and it will throw an error if that file already exists, because then we can create another file. And then to the mode here, the second parameter mode, and we can have specified it if we want to give it a text mode or binary mode. And if we don't specify anything, it will just be text mode, so we can write strings out to the file or read string to the files. But if we, for example, choose the binary mode here, we will choose, you will use the keyword B here, and it will set the mode to binary, and we can use that if we, for example, are working with images and stuff like that is using binary numbers. So that's it for the function here, the open function here we're going to use, and I'll show you some different kind of example with it. But it takes two parameters, the file name and the mode, and I'll go into different kind of examples with these keywords. So the first one here is just to create a text file, and then we specify a file which is equal to this function we just talked about, open, and then we specify the file name here. I want to call it just text file.text. So it will create a text file in my directory because I didn't specify any specific path. And then we give it the keyword X, which means that we'll just create a new file, which is set up here. So if we hit Shift Enter here, it will not print anything out, but it will create a file, and I'll go out to my directory here, and we see in the bottom here that a couple of seconds ago it created this text file here, and if you just open up, it will be empty. So now we have created a text file in our directory, and in the second example here, I'll show you how to read a file. So here we read a file and we specify the path. So again, we just say file equals open, and we open the text file for reading. And then to read a file, I'll set a variable here that I set equal to the file we just opened here, and then we call the function read. which is the function we use to read from a file that is open. So if I print this out, we can see that nothing comes out here. But if we go into the file here, we specified here, and for example, just write hello, hi, I'm decoding library, and we hit Control S, we'll save the file. And then there's something, it's not empty anymore, the text file. And if we go back here and try to read the file, we can see that we read the file, we opened it and we read it. And then when we try to print it, this variable out, we get the hi, I'm decoding library. So we opened up the file and we read it, and yeah, that's pretty much it. So we can also like only read parts from a file if we have a file with a lot of lines in a file, and we only want to like read the headlines or in multiple lines. So we can also like read only parts from a file where we just do the same thing where we open up the file, but then we specify the keyword R for reading, and then we can like file.read, and then we can specify how many parts we want to read from the file. And in this case, we want to read the two first characters in the file because it's a string we wrote in the file. And if we print the first two parts out, it will indeed be hi because it was hi, I'm decoding library, so the two first characters here will be hi. And it's also possible to read a line from the text file, and then we'll just call the function file.readLine, and then it will take the first line. But if we like call the same function again, like here we have the first line equals file.readLine, and then the second line, which is equals to file.readLine, it will read the first line, and then after that it will read the second line, and then it will just keep on reading the next line. So if we print this out, we can see that like hi, I'm decoding library is on the first line, but there's nothing on the second line. So if we go in here and make a new line, and we just say hi again, and save it, we can then go back to the Jupyter notebook and run the script again. Oh, I just deleted parentheses. So if we hit shift enter again, we can see that the second line is hi again, which is indeed correct. So it's also possible to like read multiple lines in a text file. Another thing that is really important when we're working with files is that we close the file again when we're done using it. So when we have opened up a file and we have done the modification or reading or writing to a file, it's really important that we close the file again, because then it probably won't save, or if we want to read the file in another line of code or something like that, like then it's already open and we can't access that same file because it's already open and it hasn't been closed. So in this case, we're closing the file when we're done using it. So we just open up the file and we close it with this command. We call the file close, and then it will close the text file and release it. So if we try to read the file after we have closed it, it will give us an error because like the IO operation on close file, so we will get an error. So it's really important that we close the file after we're done working with it. The first example I have here is like how to read to a file if we have, for example, strings, or we have an output from a function that we want to like save, and then we just write it to a file. Then we can do it with the write function here, and we just open up the file we want to like write to. We can either use the append or write keyword as we talked about earlier. So we use the write function here to write out as a string to the file. So in this case, I just wrote this line to the file, and if we just start with hit shift enter and we close the file, remember to close the file after we have written to it. And then just to like show that it worked, we will read the file after writing to it. So we just open up the file again with the keyword R for reading, and then we read the file, print it out, and then we remember to close the file again. So if I shift enter, it will print out hi, I'm decoding library, which was the first line, and then hi again. And then we wrote to the file like the third line. I just wrote this line to the file, which is indeed the third line here. And if we go back to the text file here and just update it, we can see that it updated it in here as well. So now we also know how to write to a file and how to read it and see if it did it correctly. So the last example is to like delete a file, like how we want to delete it. If we want to delete a file, how we do it. So to like remove or delete a file, we have to import the OS, like the operating system library here. and then we can call like, because then we have to go into our directory on a computer and remove some files or directories. So we have to import the operating system package here. So to remove the file, we just call it remove function and then specify the file, where here we can also specify the path if we want to delete a file in another path in our computer. So os.remove text file, it will remove the file, and if I hit shift enter, we can go back here again, and we can try to update the page here, and we can see that it is not found because we just deleted it. And if we go back to our directory again, we can see that deleted the last file down here. So indeed it worked, and we have now removed the file we just created and modified. And in Python, it's also possible to check if a file already exists in the path. If we like want to create a new file, we can just like check before if it's already exists in the path or something else. So to check if it exists in the path, we just use this function. We check if the os.path.exist, and then we specify the name or the path. And if it exists, we remove the file, and if it doesn't exist, we just print out the file doesn't exist, so we can like see that it doesn't exist, and we can create a new file with that name, or if we want to do something else. So yeah, that's pretty much it for this video. We've talked about like how we handle files in Python and how we can open up a file and create it, and then just do modifications to it, like if we want to write to the file or just read to it and stuff like that. So it's a pretty nice future in Python and also in other programming languages, and we're probably going to use this if we're doing some kind of test or validation on other Python scripts in later videos, where we want to like store our data or results from function, and then we can read it into another like Excel or plots and graphs and stuff like that. So it's very useful to know, and also like just to like know how to use. So that's pretty much it for this video, guys. Remember to hit the subscribe button and bell notification under the video so you can help me grow this channel, and so that you can get more videos about this in the future. I really hope you enjoy watching these videos and you learn how to like do the basic stuff in Python. In the next video, we're going to talk about like the standard library and the standard built-in functions in Python, and I'm going to show you some different kind of examples, like how to use those functions, and also like just what the standard library is capable of. So thanks for watching this video, guys, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.